All right, what's going on, everybody? My name is Andrew Damon. Thank you so much for pressing play on this video. On this channel, we talk about the Bible, the history of the Bible, and the context therein. We had somebody reach out with a question about oath taking. This is Natasha 7055, and they say, "Can you talk about swearing and oaths?" Matthew 5:34. I feel like I understand it. I feel like it's straightforward. My work had me become a notary, but that requires an oath, and I can also be brought to court and testify under oath as well. I see this as something I shouldn't do because of Matthew and James 5:12. Some people say I'm taking it too far. What are your thoughts? It's a great question. Great question. It's actually not something I've ever really considered before. It's important, just like we always talk about, that we can't just sit here and make assumptions or particular thought processes or come to complete conclusions without understanding the full understanding of what the Bible is saying. So the particular one that you're talking about is verse 33 all the way through verse 37. So let's go ahead and do that. Matthew chapter 5, verse 33 all the way through verse 37. It's right down here where my cursor is. This is what Jesus says. He says, "Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn.' But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." So very important to understand the implications being made here by Jesus. Jesus is speaking primarily in a context for what these people, these disciples, these people listening to him would have understood. Part of the Old Testament times and Old Testament understanding would be oath taking. You take an oath, that's important. You take an oath, you're swearing by something, that's something that you are to do. However, what Jesus is saying is not contradicting those things. What he's saying is that what the integrity of an individual has, what the integrity that the person has, is very important. In fact, there's a gentleman that actually kind of pinpointed this more particularly that I wanted to bring up. This comes from a particular website. The page is not loading right now, so we'll see if it does it in a second. But this person basically says, when they're doing a commentary on this verse, it says, "Jesus now says flatly that his disciples should not take an oath at all. They should not swear by anything. The main reason is that a person known for integrity does not need to enhance their promises. The upright truth behind a Christian's yes or no should be strong enough to stand on its own. Another concern is that swearing by something that belongs to God comes too close to swearing by God himself. Therefore, Jesus says not to swear by heaven because it's God's throne." He will expand on what that is and kind of describe that in the following verses, which we've already read. So again, I think the true context of what's actually happening here is not that you can't sit there and swear by an oath necessarily. What we're talking about is the contrast between integrity of the Christian and whether swearing that oath is actually having you compromise what would already be a good enough promise. So just for instance, right, you had mentioned in your comment that you might have to go to court and you might have to testify, you might have to swear an oath. Now, a court oath is basically, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And you can answer with, I do, yes, all of that. If you promise to do that as a Christian, your yes is your yes, and you will do that. In fact, you're doing it with God as your judge, ultimately. So that is 100% biblical. Now, the other side of that is, of course, when you become a notary, you also have to take an oath. And I actually did a little bit of research onto this just to see kind of what oath you would have to be taking. And I don't know if it depends on the specific state, but I do know that it depends, or it's largely the same, but it's for different states. They might have you do different things. But at least for the state that I live in, which is Tennessee, at the office, the applicant will take and subscribe to an oath before the county clerk or a deputy clerk to support the Constitution of the state of Tennessee and the United States. So whatever state you live in, it would be that state and the United States. He goes on by saying, "And that notary will, without favor or partiality, honestly and faithfully and diligently discharge the duties of a notary public." So you're basically promising to be truthful and faithful and do what your job entails. And if you promise that, you're good. If you're a Christian, you're promising that you're doing that. Now, don't promise necessarily by God. Don't promise by Jerusalem. Don't promise by heaven, but promise as a Christian, because what comes along with that promise is the weight of what you believe. If me as a Christian, if I stand there and my integrity is on the line and I use my integrity and I say yes or no, that holds a lot of weight. Why? Because I'm a Christian, because I am a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm a part of that body of Christ. So again, the true context of what this is saying is not saying, don't swear an oath. Don't do that. What it's saying is, if you're going to swear an oath, you actually need to make sure that your yes is your yes and your no is your no. And make sure when you swear that oath, you don't feel like your yes or your no isn't good enough, because your yes or no as a Christian, a devout believer in God, it needs to stand on its own. That's a good enough thing to say if you are a faithful and true person with truth. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I would say that you're fine to do that. That's just basic wisdom from what I would say. And again, once we understand this and know this from a historical standpoint and why Jesus would say this, because a lot of people were saying this kind of thing. They were swearing by heaven. They were swearing by, Jerusalem and swearing by God and all that. And Jesus is making it clear, you don't need to do that. You shouldn't do that. Your yes is your yes and your no is your no. That's his point. So hopefully that helped. If you guys are interested in getting your questions answered on the show, just like Natasha's, please feel free to write me something in the comments section. Also, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys on Monday.